All right. Welcome, everybody. Another edition, Legend Sports Amplifier. We're talking baseball, baseball history, all kinds of different things. And I'm really happy to have on today Rocco Constantino. Welcome aboard, sir.
Thanks for having me, Philip. It's really great to be here and really looking forward to talking baseball with you.
Awesome, awesome. This will be fun. I mean, I wanted to talk about. I know there's so much I want to talk to you about. I mean, I was telling you, I love origin stories. So we're going to talk about how you got to where you're at and what you're doing and your new book and other things you've got going on. And I want to get at some point down the road talk about a little bit of the current state of the game and some of the things that are going on with that too. So let's start with. How'd you get to where you're at? You're athletic director out in Santa Barbara, but a New Jersey boy. So tell us a little bit about your story, your journey.
Yeah, my background is in education and athletics. I've been doing that my entire adult life. I was a high school teacher. Then I was a Division II NCAA head softball coach for 9 years. We had a good program, Bloomfield College in New Jersey. And I was an assistant athletic director at the college too. I loved coaching. We had a good team, good program, average about 25 wins a year. But then, time comes after 9 years. I want to make that move and become an athletic director. So I landed eventually out in Santa Barbara, California, a pretty good place to land. We are the one of the bigger junior colleges in California. Great baseball program, great athletics program. We have 21 sports, and we are Jesse Orosco. We call Jesse Orosco our top alum for baseball. So he got his start here, and I'm a Mets fan, so I'm happy to deal with that. So that's how I got with the into athletic director.
Awesome. That's a long way. What made you pick? How'd you wind up in Santa Barbara? It's a long way from New Jersey.
Yeah, I Googled. I saw they were looking for an athletic director, so I Googled, the school to check it out. The first picture that came up was a picture of the football stadium, which sits directly across from the Pacific Ocean, right across the street.
Oh,
It's
nice.
one of the most beautiful, unbelievable views you'll ever see. And my office is overlooking the Pacific Ocean. And anyway, that's all I had to do for me. I said, I'll apply, but I don't think I'll
Right.
get it. Figured every AD would want to work there, but I said the right thing to somebody. So I've been here 4 years, going on to my fifth year. And he said everything's been going good.
Awesome, man. That's congratulations. That's very, very cool. I mean, that's something that I think everybody can relate to, right? You want to pursue your dream. You got to do what you got to do, and to get somewhere and keep stepping up that ladder, man. I'm sure you'll be heading other places maybe down the road. Who knows, right?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you're right. And it's you got to take a chance sometimes. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd worked my entire adult life. Every job I had was no more than 15 minutes from where I was born.
Hmm.
So to move across the country from New Jersey to California was a big step. It's a risk, but you got to take risks sometimes.
Yeah, I can relate. I mean, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and at some point, yeah, for if you want to further your career, you got to move. So I'm down here in Texas now by way of Virginia. So, you do what you got to do. So you're into. I know you've written a couple of books. We'll talk about those in a second. I'm going to put them up on the screen as well. But you also do your own. You're involved in a podcast, Ball Nine. How'd you get involved in that, and what's the story
Yeah,
about that?
yeah. Ball nine's been great. We've been doing it a little bit over a year, I think 13 months or so. And the story was basically my buddy that I grew up with, played Little League baseball with, Chris Vitale. He moved out to California around the same time I did. And long story short, we found ourselves at an event at Angel Stadium. It was an event to benefit baseball players, former players down in their luck.
Hmm.
And we had no idea what to expect. So we went there and just the two of us, and we sat at our table, and sitting at the other people at our table were Dennis Lamp, the former pitcher,
Hmm.
Tony Muser, former Royals manager and player, and Tom Gamboa. And then sitting back to back to me was Rod Carew and his wife and grand
Nice.
Bobby Gritcher. I mean, it was a small event, but it was mostly major league players, and these guys got up and told stories. It was like stand-up comedy. I mean,
I
every
bet.
guy that got up had these incredible stories. So we said to Chris, Chris said to me, we should try and start some kind of platform to let players tell their stories and talk
Awesome.
about baseball and baseball history.
Awesome.
Um, yeah, so that was literally on the ride home that we talked about it. And I got to give Chris a lot of credit because he's invested time, money. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, he's really gone full in on this. He put
Mm-hmm.
together an initial team, me, him, Kevin Kernan, who was a 40 plus year sports writer for the New York Post. And he just retired that May. Josh Hedgeka, who was a double-A pitcher for the Mets, the Brooklyn Cyclones. He developed our website for us.
Nice.
And we got in a couple other people. Dan Tiant, Louis' son, is involved, and Wes Clements, ESPN announcer. So we got this team together, and we just give the players a voice and tell their stories. And we interview everybody from Hall of Famers to cup of coffee guys, and doesn't matter. Everybody's got an amazing story. So
it's beautiful. I'm gonna throw the website up here real quick so people can check it out. No, it's beautiful. I think I real quick when we were talking before about why I started doing this, and this is just my own effort to try to help out and give some exposure. But what you just said about the stories, there are so many stories that people don't know about, and one of the things that and I don't want to get into it just yet, but if you're on Twitter, or you're on social media, or you're just reading articles, people sometimes tend to look at things in a vacuum without any perspective or context, and it's all one way, and they tend to forget that these guys are human beings too, right? I mean, they have stories and backgrounds and where they came from, and they're not they're not a video game, and by you guys telling those stories about players, and I've had guests on here, historians, authors, researchers, people who have spent a good chunk of their lifetime learning and trying to get this word out about the Negro Leagues. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do. The same kind of thing is get these stories out there. I appreciate it, man. I think that's I'm glad you guys are doing that.
yeah. Yeah.
So here's that Ball 9 website. I see you got the Yogi. I checked that one out the other day. Yeah, some very, very cool stuff. I mean,
there's the
beautiful
Dwight
website.
Evans interview. There's my Al Worthington interview right there.
Yeah, I bet that was. Yeah, there was one I listened to the other day that you had on as well. Who was that? You had. I mentioned to you that he was born in Wilkes-Barre, which is not too far from me, but he ended up going to the Red Sox and was Rookie of the Year. And
Don Schwal, was that Don Schwal?
Don Schwal, yeah.
And
that was a great interview as well.
Those guys are great. I've been interviewing. I started off doing a little tribute to the 1961 summer of '61 on the 60th anniversary. So we interviewed Don Schwal, was the '61 Rookie of the Year. Jim Gentile, who finished third behind Mantle and Maris in the MVP voting, and incredibly, just one vote behind Mantle and just two behind Maris in 1961. And then we interviewed Rocky Colavito. I interviewed Rocky Colavito, who started the All-Star game next to Mantle and Maris in the outfield in '61. So I mean, it's just amazing to me that I could sit there and ask a guy, what was it like to pitch to Jackie Robinson?
It's awesome, right?
And what would it like to be teammates with Ted Williams? There's not many people left like that. So it's great to be able to help them tell their stories.
Absolutely. I told you before as well how I became involved or kind of infatuated with the put you back on with the Negro Leagues was back in 1992. Reggie Jackson did a benefit night for these guys. There was no pension fund for them. There was not anything for these guys, and this was back when many of them were still with us. I mean, Buck O'Neill was still there. This is Jimmy Crutchfield, Josh Gibson Jr. I got to meet many others that were there, and the stories like you're talking about that they were telling, I was like, are you kidding me? I mean, I thought I knew baseball. I mean, growing up, I was a baseball fan as a kid, and then to hear these stories, it just got me so interested in it, and I've been hooked on it ever since. It's 30 years, and it's still going, and I think more people need to know all these stories like that you're telling and about the Negro Leagues and everything else. So I think it's great. So let's let's talk about your books. You've written a couple now. The first one that you did, I know was very well received, that 50 moments that define Major League Baseball. Let's talk about that one first.
Yeah, that was great, and that was kind of inspired by the way I learned about baseball growing up. My dad and his twin brother, they ran a business, a video business from our house, and they were baseball nuts. They were born in they would be 90, if they were alive, 90 years old this year. So they had all these great stories from the 1930s onward. So every night in my house, we had my father and my uncle, me and my brothers sitting there in the living room, and they did their work in the living room, and we had the Yankee game on or the Mets game. So it was the two of them telling stories, and it was Phil Rizzuto telling his stories, and Ralph Kiner and all those guys. And just every guy that came up to bat, somebody had a story about him. Mm-hmm. So, I figured at some point, I said, I want to get 50 moments. It's not a top 50. It's just 50 interesting games that were interesting to me. Almost, I'd say, randomly selected. Some, super famous games, some curiosities, highs, lows, different things like that. And I just, told the game story, the background, and then, for anything that people were still alive, I tried to interview people who either played in that game or were teammates of the key people involved. So I interviewed about 60 former major leaguers. And, just as an example, I took Derek Jeter and Joe Torre. They made, when Joe Torre made his debut as Yankee manager, and it was Jeter's, playing in that game too. And, what was it like? What were the expectations? So I reached out to some of the guys that were on the team at that point. I was an unknown author at the time and kind of still am, but I couldn't get a hold of Derek Jeter or Torre, but I got a hold of their teammates and said, hey, what was it like to what were you expecting? What were you thinking? And just kind of get different perspectives. I tried to interview coaches, umpires, different things like that. So it presented a really, I think, interesting topic. It's a lot of different perspectives. It's games from, the past, from 1900 on.
That's what I was. That's the first thing I thought of when I was looking through the excerpts and the reviews, is that you got a nice selection of all the way through baseball history. So it was good. Anybody who can relate to anything can find something in there that they probably remember or grew up or heard about. It's very, very cool. Very cool. And then your recent book that just came out about a month ago, right? Beyond Baseball's Color Barrier. And this one is why, caught my attention why I reached out to you, is because I've been involved in, like I said, trying to get this word out with the Negro Leagues and help where I can. And you've got Josh Gibson on there, so they've got the recent push. Well, the recent exposure to put Josh Gibson's name on the Baseball MVP award, which is very, very fun. I'm going to have tonight at 7:00 another one of the artists on in the roundtable to talk about their work and highlighting that. So that should be fun. And we're doing that every week for the next month until they finally unveil the winner. That's been some interesting work that's been done in there. But so this is to me, it's been a topic of conversation I've had with many people over the years, not just Negro Leagues, but the history of from the Negro Leagues to Jackie Robinson to today, and how there's been this ebb and flow of talent that's come in, and that's why I thought that this book was really timely when it comes to a lot of the discussions that have been going on recently. So tell us a little bit about what made you get into this topic.
Yeah, it was a topic like you had mentioned, origin stories. It's something that I always had an interest in. I was a baseball nut, like I said, growing up. I remember my senior year in high school. I thought I knew everything, of course, about baseball, teenager and all that. But I was playing high school baseball, and we were playing against Patterson Kennedy High School. And my dad says, that's a famous stadium.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I never really realized that. I'd been there for, football. Our high schools were rivals. So I just kind of asked him about it. And he said, yeah, the Negro Leagues used to play there. The New York Black Yankees, the Newark Eagles played there a little bit. New York Cubans played there. And I just had no idea. And my dad, taught me a little bit about Josh Gibson and Cool Papa Bell and and Satchel Paige and all those people, and it was like opening a whole new world for me. So I always
Hmm.
had an interest in that based on that. Fast forward to 2019, I have to give my publisher a lot of credit on this. Roman and Littlefield and Kristen Karniski. She approached me late in 2019 and said, we'd like a baseball book on African American history in Major League Baseball. So my first book did well for them, and she, thought I could be a good candidate to write that kind of book. And she just kind of gave the broad topic of that and said, speak with your agent and come up with whatever you think and make a proposal. So I was thinking of, doing something about the early times, something about the later times. And, there's a ton written about Jackie Robinson already.
Hmm.
So I just said, why don't we do a comprehensive history? We start in the 1870s and go all the way through today. And, it's a history and a celebration and just honoring everybody from the early guys, Will White, Fleetwood
Hmm.
Walker, and those guys, um, all the way straight through today and looking towards the future.
Awesome. That was what I wanted to ask you about. So I have not read the book yet, but I do plan on it. But what's a little taste of where is it going in the future? How did you work that into this book?
Yeah, I used Sabre did a demographic study in 2016 where they tracked participation of African Americans, Latinos, Asians, and white players in Major League Baseball.
Hmm.
So the peak was in the 70s and 80s,
Hmm.
where it was about 17, 18%. And at the same time, the Hispanic population in baseball was at about 11, 12, up to 15%. Um, and then honestly, after I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but after the 1994 strike, when baseball came back, that is the exact moment that participation started declining among African American players.
Hmm.
Um, and again, I don't know if it had to do with the strike or, it's a lot of factors. The rise in popularity, I think, in basketball
Hmm.
played a big role. And of course, the cost, as baseball has kind of on the youth level become a country club sport,
Right.
um, and the rise in Hispanic population too in Major League Baseball, which is up above 25% now.
Hmm.
So all of that knocked African American percentage down to about 6.5%. In 2013 to 16, right around there.
Hmm.
Uh, since then, though, it's leveled off. It's stopped declining, and it's actually turned around, and it's up above 8% again.
Hmm.
And so I do think there's hope. It's tough, and I had this conversation with Bob Kendrick, like you had mentioned, he's president of the Negro League Museum, just on mathematics with the participation among Asian and Hispanic groups. It's not going to get back to the way it was in the 70s and 80s, where it was 18% um, African Americans. But
Hmm.
if you look at the year 2000, which it's not that fairly recent and a fairly reasonable percentage, 12.5% African American participation in Major League Baseball. So, and at the same time, 24.5% for Hispanic. So I think that's a number, an area that's Major League Baseball can shoot for, and I don't see any reason why it can't get that high. There's a lot of exciting young players to inspire the next generation.
Absolutely. Have you the one of the ones groups I follow, the Players Alliance,
Mm-hmm.
they've been doing a lot of work just this past year. I think they just started trying to get to that exact demographic that we're talking about here, the younger inner city kids, to try to get them back involved in baseball, because you said it exactly. I mean, basketball, football, other sports are impacting that were not as popular before. But boy, oh boy, that was, you put it a way I hadn't heard before. But yeah, the country club aspect of travel teams and youth sports, and you have to have all this money involved. More investment needs to be made, I think, in those types of things across the entire country if they want to get baseball back to the way it was. And I hope they do. I really do. I think it needs to get back a little bit more of what it was built on. 100 years ago. So,
Yeah.
yeah, good stuff. I mean, that's one aspect I think in talking to all the guests I've had on that I hope people understand. Um, yes, there was a Major League Baseball and there was Negro League Baseball, but those players were not playing in the Negro Leagues because they weren't good enough. Many of them were. They just were not allowed to. Many could have and were not allowed to. But when they weren't playing, they were barnstorming and they were spreading the brand of baseball everywhere in the country. And the small towns to big towns to you name it, everywhere in between, that I don't think they are given enough credit for having done because the big cities, I mean, being a baseball historian, the East Coast dominated baseball because that's where it was born, and so you always had two teams in Boston and New York and Philadelphia, Chicago, and baseball was being played everywhere else, and a lot of it was being played by barnstorming and Negro League teams and everybody else in between, and I don't think people really understand that whole story. Do you get into that in your book? Do you talk about the barnstorming aspect of the Negro Leagues?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a tough thing with me because, like I said, it's a comprehensive history. So my biggest challenge was how do you squeeze in things that deserve, you could write, whole entire series about
Mm-hmm.
Negro Leagues and Jackie Robinson. So I want to mention them and more than just in a cursory way, but it's hard to really get into the very nitty gritty details. But yeah, definitely mention it. The two most prominent places, and that's a great point you made about how the Negro League style influenced Major League Baseball, even though they couldn't play. Major League Baseball players would go to the Negro League games and watch them. I found articles in the newspaper from those times about it.
Mm-hmm.
And Pepper Martin was probably the best example that I saw in the 1931 World Series. I mean, he dominated for the Cardinals. He batted 500, had 5 stolen bases in 7 games, was scoring runs, extra base hits, stretching singles into doubles, and just kind of went nuts. And then afterwards, he said that I saw the way the Negro League players played again in the barnstorming tours. And it's an exciting brand of baseball, and he adopted that into Major League. He was one of the first people to really say like the Negro Leagues influenced my style of play.
Mm-hmm.
And saw that with the Dodgers when they integrated too, that they brought a new style of baseball. So that was important, and also very important I thought was Wendell Smith, the famous the writer, legendary African American writer. He did a survey in the Pittsburgh Courier in 1939 that was so eye-opening, where he asked he surveyed every single National League team and said, what do you think of African American players? Which ones are the best ones? Which ones can play in Major League Baseball? And would you be accepting of them?
Mm-hmm.
And unanimously, not one player or manager, and he asked every manager of every team, every one of them said, we'd love to have them on our team. Manager said, I would, treat them the same. They'd be on my team. And they all pointed the fingers at the owners. If the owners would let them on the teams, we'll have them. And, there were some quotes from players. I mean, Walter Johnson said Josh Gibson was better than Bill Dickey and would be a $200,000 player if he was allowed to play.
Mm-hmm.
Honus Wagner, they called Pop Lloyd the Black Honus Wagner. And Wagner had a quote saying, after I saw him play, I was honored that they should name such a player after me. And Gabby Harnett said there would be if they allowed African Americans, there'd be a mad scramble to sign all these great guys.
Mm-hmm.
And also what struck me about that was it wasn't just Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson and Cool Papa Bell. It was everybody, Biz Mackey, Mule Suttles, Turkey Stearns, Oscar Charleston, Martin Diego. Every player surveyed had 4 or 5 different guys that could play. I mean, it's a shame. And that was part of what I wanted to accomplish too. There's so many more people involved in this, from players to behind the scenes. And it's such a great history. And I hope I did it justice in honoring it.
No, it's great. I think it's fantastic. The more perspectives and the more avenues to get the word out there and educate people. What's your take on this? Because I've had this discussion many times with people, and a lot of people, they just it's like a blocker sometimes. So when you hit people like that, you kind of just got to move on. But to me, baseball is the ultimate like zero sum game. If something happens, something else is not happening, kind of thing. And when it comes to personnel, and let's go back to the 1920s. With 25-man rosters now. It wasn't always 25-man rosters. I mean, heck, you go back to the beginning of baseball, they had 11 guys on the team. 14 guys was a lot. I mean, and really the money drives a lot of this because the less players on the team, obviously the less salary you got to pay out. So there's always been this battle between management and players as to who's getting the cut of the pie. But baseball, they talk of things. It's in a vacuum. They like to say that the Negro Leagues were not good enough to play in Major League Baseball. That's why they're in the Negro Leagues. Obviously, that's not true. There's thousands of stories that refute that. But what they also forget when they say that the Negro Leagues were not Major League is, okay, so if some of the Negro League players were playing in the Major Leagues, that would mean that a significant portion of Major League players were not Major League, yeah. Right? Yeah. Because the zero-sum effect means that now those players are now pushed down into AAA, and AAA pushed into AA, and then eventually some of them are out of baseball, organized baseball, period. And what do you think? What would be the effect there? I mean, it's so hard putting a number on that, but if you just looked at straight demographics, at the time there was about a 15%, 12 to 15% population. What percent? I mean, how many Negro League players could have potentially played in the major leagues? That's just so hard to quantify.
Yeah, it is, and that's a great point too. And that's something that came up in my research and a couple of points throughout the book, where there were quotes about, early on. I forget off the top of my head who said it, but there were quotes, from the early 1900s where people were saying, that was their major problem with African Americans participating in baseball, was that they'd be taking a job from a white player, and that was kind of when baseball was whites only, and the color line started to erode. They started, Native Americans and Cubans and Hispanic players. So it wasn't really whites only anymore. It was everybody but African Americans. So there was always that thing about a minority taking a white person's job. And then when Jackie Robinson was playing for the Montreal Royals in 1946, I came across an article where somebody was talking about how, the team has embraced Jackie Robinson, the city of Montreal, the league, everybody is fine with it. And the guy made a point to say, and again, I wish I could remember off the top of my head, it might have been the manager. But he said, and nobody was really upset that a black person took a white guy's job. Well, that was always on people's minds, and that was in the forefront. Yeah.
I'm sure it was. I mean, it's just math. The world is math, right? Before we got online, we were talking about your background, and I grew up with a lot of Italians where I grew up in the pizza capital of the world, right? But one of the things I mentioned to you, that main street that runs through Northeast PA is 75 miles of its main avenue. It's South Main Street, North Main. It changes names slightly, but it runs through about 20 different little towns, and all of those towns were made up of different ethnic backgrounds who came off the boat, so to speak, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, in those waves of immigration that came here, and then they set up their own little town. And those little towns have that ethnic flavor to them, and the same way that we're talking about with white and black discrimination, there was discrimination if your last name was Italian or if your last name was Polish or Russian, and everybody was white, but there was still that same discrimination. However, that was the difference. Everybody was white. No one looked at someone and said, right off the bat, they were automatically excluded just because they had darker skin, and that the whole thing is just outrageous when you think about it. How this could have happened for as long as it happened. I mean, it was 60, 70 years of that, and that's the other side of this. Not only, not only were they not allowed to play, the conditions and the travel and everything else involved. everything was stacked against them, and they still were able to persevere. It's a great. I mean, the story. It's like a great American story. Eventually, you keep at it and you adapt and you overcome. That's what it's
Yeah.
all about.
Yeah.
Um,
Bob Kendrick had a great point of that and that was the highlight of my research for the book was flying out to Kansas City and being
I
able to
bet.
spend time with him to interview. But he always brought up a great point when we talked. He said they weren't just the players. They were the managers, they were the coaches, the GMs. That they set up the travel. It was African American from the players all the way through the owners and front office. It was a huge business. I think if I remember right, it was the second or third biggest African American
Hmm.
business at one point.
Hmm.
I think it was second behind some insurance company.
Yes, insurance. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was not just the players. Like I said, it was the whole operation, and they ran it, and
Hmm.
they did whatever obstacles were in their way, and they were horrible obstacles. It didn't. They overcame everything to run that thing so successfully and for so long.
Hmm. Yeah, it really it's a great story of perseverance over the years, and then what happens once the floodgates open, right? I mean, Jackie Robinson comes along, and for the next decade, there is a former Negro League player who is either Rookie of the Year or MVP or whatever it is, all the way through the late 50s. And that's no coincidence. These guys didn't just spring out of the earth and become, the players that they were. They played there. They grew up watching it. That's how they learned how to play the game. That's why they were able to come into Major League Baseball and change the game, because really the game was stagnating, I think, for to a fashion, and it became a slower game. When Negro League players came in the late 1940s into the 50s, it changed the way the game was played, which was very, very significant. Do you get into your book about the fate of the Negro Leagues after that at all?
Yeah, I do, and that was an interesting point to me too. When Jackie Robinson signed, everybody was happy. Everybody, seemed to be good on the Negro League side and on the, Major League side, and there was no issues between the two leagues, is the way I would say it. When Larry Doby signed a few months later, there was pushback from the Negro Leagues. They said, finally, they saw it coming.
Mm-hmm.
Larry Doby signed, and his Negro League team owner said, "Wait a second, he's under contract with us. He can't go play there." And there was pushback because I think they saw that if all these great stars migrated over to Major League Baseball, it would be
Boy.
the end of the Negro Leagues. And it was a big business, the Negro Leagues. They played in Major League stadiums when Major League teams were on the road, and in some cases outdrew the Major League teams.
Mm-hmm.
This wasn't some kind of small local league that was going to be going away. It was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So there was some pushback as Major League Baseball was integrating, from the Negro Leagues. And, they like to have their thing. And that was part of Kennesaw Mountain Landis, too. There was a lot of discussion on whether they should integrate Major League Baseball or if they should put their resources to help strengthen the Negro Leagues. And, there's debate now
Hmm.
on whether that was just another way for Kennesaw Mountain Landis to keep them out of Major League Baseball, which is probably likely, and the owners. But Major League Baseball also made money off of the Negro Leagues too, by renting their stadiums and all that kind of stuff. So it's a very complex business situation that a lot of people don't realize.
It really is, because on one hand, many people want this to happen, but in the back of their mind, they have to know that eventually it's going to mean, the elimination of those teams. And many of those teams went on through the 50s into the 60s. I even remember as a kid in the 70s when I first started playing Little League was the Indianapolis Clowns were still traveling around
Yep.
doing a little bit of barnstorming, and it was more, showmanship and vaudeville. And I think that's part of what I think many people remember is, they tend to equate that showman aspect to the entire history of the Negro Leagues, and it's just not true. I mean, that wasn't the way the game was played. It became that to some degree because of like we're talking about. Sometimes you got to adapt and improvise and change what you're doing. But I think in a lot of people's minds, that's what's stuck in their head as to what the entire Negro Leagues were, and it just isn't the case. So,
Yeah, and I
um,
tried to get into those differences a little bit in the book too. I kind of saw it as three different things. There was the actual, there were barnstorming tours where teams of African American guys would go around and play local semi-pro teams and things like that, while white guys or mixed race teams. And it was fun, it was competitive, but usually the Negro League teams or the barnstorming teams just destroyed them.
and,
Um, as expected. And then there was the Negro League teams playing against me, Dizzy Dean and his guys, and playing against Major League teams, and the two of them would travel around together, and that
mm-hmm,
was very competitive.
mm-hmm,
And then the Negro Leagues himself was separate from that. That was African Americans, very kind of mirrored Major League Baseball. So
mm-hmm.
you're right. People, you say Negro Leagues or barnstorming, and people try to use it as an all-encompassing term, and it
That's
really
right.
isn't. Like three distinct kind of categories.
I mean, think about how funny that is, right? I mean, Rogers Hornsby and Tris Speaker are two Hall of Famers, two of the greatest players of all time. But they played on Bloomer Girl teams back in the 19 teens and 20s. And so it's like the same thing. It's like, okay, so now you're going to equate Major League Baseball with the Bloomer Girls because Rogers Hornsby is playing as the ringer, they called them, right? They had a Major League Baseball ringer on these teams. It doesn't make any sense. That wasn't the product at that point, and it just bothers me when I hear people talk about that as if it was all about the Zulu cannibals and that kind of thing. And no, it wasn't. That was it was part of the show. I mean, at that point. Prior to that, though, no, it was big business, and it was pretty hardcore baseball. You mentioned it earlier. The things that Major League Baseball did in response. That Pepper Martin story was great. The innovations that the Negro Leagues did over the decades with the first lights and they had promotional nights and women's nights and all sorts of things. The All-Star, the East-West All-Star game, they were playing two of them. It was so popular. So then a few years later, Major League Baseball was playing two. So there was so many things that and do they learn from each other? Obviously, yes. I mean, baseball evolves over time, but there were a lot of innovations that the Negro Leagues did. Do you touch on any of that in your book as well?
Yeah, a little bit too, and that's great stuff. And I kind of got into a little bit with, and again, this came from Bob Kendrick's interview, and then it led to further research. But he actually said that Kennesaw Landis had a very good relationship with Rube Foster.
Interesting.
We were talking about the complexities of Landis's role in his situation, but he said they had a good relationship. I went back and looked, and you're right. They learned from each other, and everything from business practices to innovations. Catching gear, I got an early start in the Negro Leagues. I think there's some discrepancy between Roger Bresnahan or Negro Leagues was the first to use shin guards and things like that. But
yep.
A lot of innovation came from the Negro Leagues, and it makes you wonder too if those minds were in Major League Baseball in the 1910s and 20s and 30s. What would
boy.
like at that time,
Boy, that's a great point because I've mentioned that a few times as well, and so have some of the other guests. I mean, look at what racism stole from not only the game of baseball, but from the whole entire, American experience. I mean, if all of this was the way it should have been, who knows, right, where we would be? I mean, it's an interesting. You can't go back. You can only speculate. But I agree. I think that there's a lot of things that could have been done and done sooner, and innovations and changes to the game, and who knows, But brings me to the next point, though, because I wanted to get your take on the more modern aspect of things. Changes to the game. Boy, oh boy. I mean, you're a college athletic director, so I'm sure you're dialed in on a lot of this stuff. But there is so much talk going on about the state of the game, today, and the three true outcome, and that was great. The country club playing of youth sports. But what do you think is going on with baseball today? I mean, it just seems like it's not an easy thing to put your finger on, but boy, oh boy, not all change is always good. I
Right,
guess
right,
I
right.
guess was where I was going with that, you know. So.
Yeah, that's true. And and when I get asked about that, I kind of, the game evolves. All sports evolve. And if you go back, Major League Baseball, when we were kids, wasn't what our parents watched, and it wasn't what
Hmm.
our grandparents watched. The game has a natural evolution, and all sports do.
Hmm.
But what's happening now doesn't seem like a natural evolution to me. It seems like forced gimmicks.
Hmm.
In '68 when they lowered the mound, or they enforced the mound height rule. That wasn't something that seemed so forced. It was not that I was around for it, but in doing my research, there wasn't pushback for it. There wasn't a million other changes. It was, hey, only one person batted 300. People are, Bob Gibson's out there with his ERA, and let's kind of rein it in a little. So they moved the mound down, and that was about it. But now all these gimmicks coming out at once, it's changing the sport too
Hmm.
fast. It's not a natural evolution, and I don't think we're seeing the best of these players. It's taking guys that should be these multi-dimensional players and turning them into the one-dimensional, three true outcome thing: home
Hmm.
run, strikeout, or walk.
Hmm.
And it's making for a boring, more boring product. The product on the field isn't as good. And I say that, and I watch baseball every night still.
Me too.
I
Yeah.
just drove 4 hours to go watch the Mets play in San Diego last weekend. So it's difficult to watch. I'll still watch it.
But you and I are we're baseball fans, right? That
Right.
we're gonna watch it no matter what. I think what oh boy, this is a whole subject that just can get crazy. But the celebrations that are going on now too. I mean,
Yeah.
oh boy, that is such a fine line. It is supposed to be fun.
Hmm.
The game it's a game. This is a game. It's supposed to be
Right.
fun. However, is there a point you cross where it's just too much? I mean, I've seen some that have been like borderline kind of ridiculous. I mean,
Yeah. I mean,
how do you address that? You're an athletic director for a college. How have you guys have talked about any of this or?
Yeah, we do, and our baseball coach is great, and our like I said, our pro baseball program is really good, and our coaches the right way. He came to me, and wanted to order Rapsodo for the pitchers and all that kind of stuff, but he takes it and he uses the data along with Common Sense Baseball. You go to one of our games, there you see hit and runs by both teams. This level, that's what it's: hit and runs, squeeze plays, stolen bases. But then you take the analytics side of it, the Rapsodo, and if you see pitchers' numbers aren't what they should be, you can monitor them, see if something's wrong physically, mentally, whatever. So I think there's room for a combination of
Mm-hmm.
that. But you also have to teach respect. And that's one of the things I like. You have to you keep track of your dugout, make sure your dugout's clean, make sure your field's nice, make sure you're respecting opponents. Yeah, you could have fun, and you hit a walk-off homer, you should have fun.
Mm-hmm.
And if it comes in a big spot, look at Mazeroski or Bobby Thompson, they're waving their helmet around and they're jumping around,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not the same kind of level of where you're seeing it on every kind of regular season game, or fifth inning guy cracks one and he's standing there and his team's down by 5 runs and he hits a solo homer and pimps it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the kind of stuff that bothers.
Yeah.
The throwing of equipment was never anything that was accepted, so that kind of bothers me. I'm a little bat flips don't bother me as much.
Mm-hmm.
Mets hit a big homer and somebody chucks a bat, I'm happy. But when you're whipping your helmet around and really firing your bat overhand or throwing it towards people, it's just it's that me first attitude, and people that counter it and say, well, let the kids have fun. What I say is, you don't think Kirk Gibson had fun hitting that homer off Eckersley? He hit the ball, he limped around the bases, he gave a couple arm pumps, and that was one of the biggest homers in baseball history.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have to, me first and my team, and all this stuff. Look at the examples that came before, and that's what's, they're just being dismissed, and I think that's what's kind of the most disturbing thing.
Mm-hmm. The interesting point you just said before about the fan aspect, the thing about baseball, it seems to turn into. I haven't been to a game in a while with the pandemic and everything else. I plan to go soon, but even before that, a couple years, 2 years ago, last time I was at a game, you look around, and I'm a baseball fan, so I'm watching the
Mhm.
game, and I take my boys. I have three boys. I take them. We go to the game, and we're actually trying to watch the game, and
Mhm.
I'm trying to teach, tell them what's going on, because the thing about baseball, I mean, you know how it is, right? Every pitch is a different situation, and people are always in motion, and it's not just this stagnant, everybody standing around, and I'm trying to teach them that. But most people are at a game and they're just kind of on their cell phone, or they're talking or whatever they're doing, and not really paying attention until somebody hits a home run, and then hey, everybody turns around and they clap, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, I don't know, what do you do about that? I mean, how do you get people? I mean, I guess fans are going to do what they're going to do, I guess, but uh,
Yeah, and it's, I think it's a combination. Again, stealing from Bob Kendrick, he called it a microwave society that we live in. Everything's in 30-second bursts. But I also think it speaks about the way the game is played. When if you went to a game in the 70s or 80s, every team had these exciting guys. Where if they were, if Ricky Henderson was getting on base, the whole stadium's on the edge of their seat,
absolutely.
watching the pitcher keep him close, and is he going to steal? And when he took off running, there was that
Hmm.
raised tension in the stadium, and
Hmm.
there was just so much to watch, and you're waiting for people to get into good hitters counts, and now are they
Hmm.
going to put a hit and run on, or hey, we got a quick guy up, the corner's got to come in, is he going to drop down a bunt? There was so much more drama, and
Hmm.
that's all gone. It's all gone now. I'm hoping that it's coming back. I see little signs, but
Hmm.
when you take all that drama out, I mean, it's hard to blame the fans, to get involved in all the gimmicks and be on their phone, and especially the younger generation of fans.
Hmm. And I'm with you. I think over time, baseball has found little ways to make things, fair and competitive without these over the top kind of gimmicky things. I cannot stand the seven inning.
Oh my god.
Oh boy, and the ghost runners and all. I mean, boy, oh boy, no. I wish that
That,
they never did any of that, but I get it. They're,
yeah.
well, I don't know. Somewhere along the line, someone's made the decision that games are too long. I guess I don't know, and that's why they're trying to speed
Yeah.
things up. But to me, that's the beauty of baseball. If I'm going to spend my money for a ticket,
Hmm.
I'm not going and leaving in the seventh inning. I
Right.
want the game to last literally forever. If
Hmm.
my most fun at a baseball game in my entire life was when the Astros and Braves played a playoff game here. I want to say it was 2004. It was a long time ago, but it was a game where my friend and I went. It was a last minute thing. We had these tickets way up in the top of the stadium that we paid just to get in there, right? But then
Hmm.
by the sixth or seventh inning, the Braves were up, I think, 5-1, 6-1, something like that. And late in the game, fans started to leave. So we went down. We stood behind in the Crawford boxes in the back. Then we sat down, and then eighth inning rolls around. People are leaving. We were literally at the front of the Crawford boxes, right there in left field, and
Right.
we got in, on the nosebleed seats. The game went 16 innings.
Uh, mhm.
There were so many great
Yeah.
plays and home runs, and I had a ball. Chris Burke hit this home run
Oh,
that
right,
tied
sure,
the
yeah.
game, and it was like right over my hand as I reached up. And I didn't want that game to end. I mean, that was the beauty of it, was the fact that baseball, there's no time limit. It's not over until the other team, well, until the team makes it over. Until that's really what. And so this thing about the time of a game, that's all. I mean, it has to do with TV, right? I mean, that's what they're trying to package it for. Is a
Yeah, I would
3 hour time
guess they're
slot?
trying to get it right in that 3 hour mark because of that fits in perfect with the schedule.
Yep.
And I agree with you. I mean, it's, I think of a story from when I was a kid. My uncle used to take me and my brothers and sisters and cousins once a year to Shea Stadium for our birthdays to a Mets game, whether we were Mets fans or not. It was, 7 or 8 of us, my parents. It was a great family event. And there was one game I remember. They were playing the Cardinals, 85 or 86, and there was a rain delay. Pretty long rain delay. We sat through the rain delay. We were running around Shea Stadium. It was Gatorade water bottle giveaway day. We were finding them all over. We had about 50 water bottles, and we ended up probably spending about 5 or 6 hours at Shea Stadium,
Hmm.
and that's the experience of being a fan and having that stuff. And it's something here now. It's almost 40 years later, and it's something I'll never forget. And it was part of my childhood. Like I had so much fun going to that Mets game,
Hmm.
and yeah, I was rooting for the Mets and in in the game and all that. But you're rushing an experience where you should be sitting there, and enjoying things with your family or whoever you're at the game with.
That's right.
I don't get the sense of it. It's you want to. Used to be if you paid your $20 for a ticket or whatever, and you got 12, 13, 14 innings, you were fortunate to get more baseball for your money.
That's
Now it's
right.
like the opposite.
That's right. I mean, if I'm going to go and spend $300-400, because by the time you take your
Mm-hmm.
family and they're the cheapest tickets you can get, and then you got to pay for parking and you got to pay for hot dogs and a little souvenir. If I'm going to go and do that, I'm not leaving in the sixth inning. What are you, crazy?
All right.
There's no way. I'm going to stay as long as that game will be keep on going. And I just don't get that whole thing. But yeah, the where the game is at today, I'm not sure. So you use Repsodo, right? What other things do you use, or is your baseball coach using? Because one of the things I've been following is I find it fascinating is
Mm-hmm.
this back and forth between many or former players who see many of that as a lot of his gimmicks, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the bars and the things that they
Mm-hmm.
for hitting and this, and so what are you guys doing out there in Santa Barbara with some of
Yeah,
that?
it's a tough balance because that's the world that baseball is today, whether we like it or not. It's a lot of those things are working their way into the higher levels, the Division I colleges, the major leagues, the minor leagues. So on our level, we do have to try and prepare our players
Mm-hmm.
or when they go to that next level. And we do have a lot of guys that are currently in the minors, currently on major Division I teams. So we got to prepare them. So as far as the gimmicks are concerned and out there swinging PVC pipe and all that crap, I've never seen that on our field, thankfully. Our coach, he like I said, he does a great balance. It's more traditional type of coaching where he teaches the game, teaches respect, but also recognizes that hey, we live in a different world. These kids have fun. They have their little fun hand signals that they do when they hit a double or steal a base, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, but still, it's maintaining the respect for the game. He's got you don't take your helmet off until you touch home plate or get in the dugout. It's uniforms laundered every day. Um, all that kind of stuff. So it's a good balance there. From what I see, we don't get too gimmicky at all, which I'm happy about.
Mm-hmm.
And it benefits us because we play in a very competitive Southern California conference. People get drafted every year, and we're good. We're one. We've been conference champs a bunch of times, playoff teams, just about every year. So it's good to see that old style baseball could still win in a world
Mm-hmm.
where it's not accepted as widely as it used to be.
Mm-hmm. I'm with you. I think, and I think many former players would say the same thing. It's not saying that new technology and new ways of doing things are bad. There's got to be a mix here. You got to take some of that. You can't turn everything into analytics, because then you lose, touch with what's real.
Yeah.
These are real
Right.
people. These are real people playing. It's not a video game. I mean, there's got to be some balance here, and so that's what baseball, I think, to me is so. I don't know. There's like a dichotomy there where you've got all these rules, whether they're written or unwritten, and at the same time, everyone's trying to break them, right? I mean, you're trying to steal signs, and you're trying to do, all kinds of things, steal a base. I mean, it's part of the game. Is some of that, finding ways around it. Like you look at, the talk now has been about. What pitchers are putting on the ball to increase spin rates, and boy, oh boy, Trevor Bauer, right?
Hmm.
Very outspoken. I'm not a Dodger fan, so I can't. I'm not saying anything either way. But um, it's interesting that some people are viewing him as a villain. With now his spin rate is way down since they
Hmm.
talked about, and other people are saying he's doing that on purpose. To illustrate what a joke it was, and it's like, okay, what's the real story here? I mean,
Yeah, and
oh boy,
it's like the steroids all over again. You never know what the real
you
story is.
don't, right? Yeah.
You never do. And who's doing it, who's not doing it, who wants to admit it. The other day Garrett Cole gave that press conference, and it really reminded me of the steroid thing. If he would have just come out and said, "Yeah, I use some stuff in my hand, just like everybody else, and now I'm not going to do it because they're stressing it," everybody would have been fine with that.
Hmm.
But instead, he gives some cockamamie, excuse and talking about all the previous generations handed that down to us, and
Hmm.
and it just doesn't come off well, and it's like nothing was learned from the steroid era.
Hmm.
Where if you just kind of admit and say like, yeah, this is fans aren't stupid, they know what's going on. Just
Absolutely.
somebody come out and say, yeah, I was doing it. You could watch the videotape. There's crap all over my hands, and now
Did
I'm
you?
not going to do it anymore. I
Did
wish
you?
somebody would just say that.
That's right. Did you see that replay where the foul tip where the ball actually stuck to the catcher's chest
Yeah.
protector? How is that even possible? I mean, come on. They're looking around
Uh-huh.
for the ball and it's stuck to the catcher's chest protector. That doesn't even seem. It didn't even seem real. When I first saw that video, I thought, no way.
I think it was Yadier Molina,
It
right? That
was.
guy.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like back in the NFL with the Stickum again in the 70s. Uh, Got to get it out of baseball now.
Yep. My take for what it's worth on all the gimmicks, and I don't want to go into
Yeah.
belabor this too much, but a lot of the gimmicky, you talk about the PVC pipe and all these other gadgets and armbands and all that kind of stuff, because it's become a country club.
Mhm.
Um, I don't these guys are doing whatever it is to make a living, right? If people are paying for that
Right.
product, um, well,
Yeah.
I don't want to say more power to them because I don't think all of it is good, but that comes to that mindset of um, I have to have the best for my kid because
Mhm.
he has to go to the best camp because if I don't, someone else is going to do it and he's going to not have the opportunity, and that's a whole other thing too, right?
Right.
Are the best athletes even getting the opportunity to play now?
Yeah.
Because of the fact that maybe there's people taking slots that are only there because they can pay for it, and that's a whole nother that's a
Yeah, that's
whole
true.
nother
And,
story.
and yeah, and parents are a big part of that. And you're right. And I worked on the high school level as a coach and an athletic director more recently. And you see that with parents in all sports. It's parents that are not really educated, not to their own fault. They're
No.
just not sports people,
Hmm.
but they see, my son's teammates are all have this, and this, and this, and my son doesn't have anything. So it's a copycat thing, and the
Hmm.
parents want to be able to say, oh yeah, I have a private pitching coach for my son, a private pitching coach for my daughter with softball, and it's every sport, and it's
Hmm.
just it's good that people are educating now that these gimmicks are just what they are. They're gimmicks, and people looking to make money off of naive parents.
Hmm.
So, you just hope that the word continues to spread and parents are a little bit more open because if they stop paying for this stuff, it'll start to go away.
That's right. That's exactly right. All right. So what else you got going on? What's your next book you're going to be writing out there?
I'm focusing now on the Ball Nine stuff. It's been great. I actually just had an interview last night with Sid Bream with the
Cool.
Braves. Had a great conversation with him. That'll be out on Friday. So no books on the horizon. I'm going to work on increasing Ball Nine. Also, have gotten involved with the Italian American Baseball Federation.
Nice.
Yeah, and they do a great thing. They're located out on the East Coast, and me and Chris Vitale, my partner at Ball Nine, we're going to try to get something going on the West Coast with them, and help them expand their brand a little bit. So no immediate baseball stuff for books on the horizon, but I definitely will be pumping out those articles once a week on Ball Nine where I'm
Cool.
interviewing former players.
Awesome, man. I'll keep putting the word out for you too. I think it's good stuff. I mean, I really do. And like I said, I'm hoping to get some of these get people like you and these other researchers, authors, people who are doing what you're doing in front of as many people in different avenues, because there's all these little niche groups that are everywhere, and you just gotta find a way to get in front of them. It's funny what you said about the Italians in baseball. Boy, you look back at baseball history, right? You could see the immigration waves all the time, right? You had the Irish in the 1880s, 1890s with the Delahanties, and everybody was mixed this. But then you get into the 1920s and 30s, and you had when DiMaggio comes along, and you had Lou Fonseca, and you name it. There was all these Italians. So that wave of Italian immigrants that came in. I mean, it's really fascinating. I mean, baseball is such a microcosm of the country in so many ways, and sometimes it's ahead of the game and it leads. Sometimes it takes a little time to catch up, but you could follow the history of baseball and get a pretty good perspective of the country in a lot of times. And it's funny, right? Because yes, the baseball color line was, to me, the most un-American thing you can think of. However, they were open about it, right? I mean, you even see it today, how many people are racist and are bigoted and are whatever they think, but yet they keep it under wraps, right? And sometimes people like that are more dangerous than the ones who are just out there doing it, right? Because
that's true. That's true.
So, baseball in a way really wasn't much different than the rest of the country. It's just that they were, kind of made it an unwritten rule, because they had to deal with all those things in society, no matter where they traveled, segregated, everything. And it really, people make the issue, well, it was an issue, but with baseball, but that was society for such a long time. And when baseball made that push after World War II to finally make it happen, it got the whole ball rolling. I mean, into the civil rights era in the 60s, and so much that baseball pushed. I mean, Jackie Robinson, to me, I mean, he was a civil rights pioneer. I mean, it was more to just a baseball player than to Jackie Robinson. So anyway, good stuff. What else you got? Anything else you want to get out here while we're on here?
No, just you can follow Ball9 on Twitter it's at Ball9Tweet, and I'm on Twitter, official MLB RFC.
So,
Frank.
So do you do that's a weekly writing updates on Ball9, or how do you?
Yeah, we have a schedule. I do. I have an article every Friday where I interview a former player or somebody associated with the game.
Cool.
Like one week I interviewed Josh Gibson's grandson, Sean, which was incredible.
Awesome. Yes.
So I interview. It's a fun interview. We have fun. We recollect stories about their career, how they got started, who influenced them as kids, their favorite moments, and then some insight. So with Sid Bream, I interviewed him last night. We talked about the famous slide in the '92 NLCS and scoring the winning run on that play. And he brought up a great perspective that I never heard before. He said he he made it by an inch. His foot got in ahead of LaVallier's tag by an inch. He said he had hit a double earlier in the game and Doug Drabek, and Drabek tried to pick him off a second twice. And Bream's like, I'm not going in there. He's the slowest guy in baseball, but Drabek was keeping him close. When Bream got up in the ninth, he walked against Drabek, and Jim Leyland took Drabek out of the game and put in Stan Belinda, who Sid Bream knew didn't have a move to second base and wasn't going to try that with the tying run on third. So Bream said, in my mind, I'm sitting there going, wow, thank God Drabek's out. I can get a big lead now. So if you look, he's freaking halfway to third base before Belinda even delivers the pitch.
Yep.
So he was able to get such a big jump and a big secondary lead and score on that by that. If he was one step closer to second, he's not scoring.
Awesome.
So it's cool perspectives like that. And I do that every week. And Kevin Kernan writes articles twice a week. And we have other things mixed in too. Kevin Zerwinski, a very talented writer. He interviews former players. He just had Dwight Evans. He's done stuff in the past with Vita Blue, Steve Balboni, a lot of great guys. And then we do podcasts as well. Our most recent one was with Rick Cerrone. Today's Dave Parker's 70th birthday. We've done Dave Parker, David Wells, Louis Tiant, Bobby Valentine. So
Awesome.
again, it's these great players
Good
being
stuff.
able to have an outlet to tell their stories.
Awesome. Good stuff, man. I appreciate it. I think that's the kind of stuff that, I mean, I love listening to them,
Mhm.
all these stories, those insights. What kind of you can't what kind of analytics can you put onto that Sid Bream story? There is none.
Right, there's none.
I mean,
And
that's
like
just baseball knowledge. That's all that is.
right,
Yeah.
and that's all it is. And like Bream said, you know, he said they should have pinch ran for him. They should have put a pitcher. He said if they would have put a pitcher in, the pitcher would have crossed home plate standing up. There wouldn't even been a play. But also, Bream said he prided himself in being able to run the bases the right way.
hmm
And Bobby Cox knew that. He's a veteran guy. He knows how to run the bases. He's not going to make a mistake. And that's what was
Boy,
more
oh boy.
valuable at that time than a little bit of extra speed. So, you're right. That's the heart of baseball. And
Boy, oh
that's,
boy,
that's
that's
the
a
kind of
great
stuff that keep
perspective.
going away.
That is
Yeah.
that's a great little story because I guarantee you nobody knows any of that.
Yeah, and like I said, and every week these guys have these unbelievable stories, and
hmm
it's so cool. And like I said, whether it's somebody like Al Worthington, we talked about, who's 92 years old. He was the last ever New York Giant to throw a pitch on the road for the Giants.
Cool.
We it's just, I talked to a guy, Ray Crone, who was in his 90s. He was minor league teammates with Hank Aaron. He debuted with the Braves the same game that Hank Aaron did. And to ask that guy, what was Hank Aaron like in the minor leagues? I mean, you just don't get that perspective.
Not
So
at all.
everybody's got these great stories, and we're happy to share.
Awesome, great stuff, man. I appreciate your time. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad it. Keep us posted. Like I said, I'll keep getting the word out for you guys and keep doing what you're doing, man.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's great to talk great baseball with somebody as knowledgeable as yourself. And it's an awesome day. Puts a smile on my face.
All right, man. Thank you. You have a good one.
All right. Thanks a
All
lot,
right.
Phil.
Bye bye.
All right.